Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. It is our pleasure today to welcome Will Friedman. Will took over the helm of the Cleveland-Cuyahoga Port Authority in June of 2010, and he brought with him experience in ports large and small, from Duke Realty Corporation, the ports of Indiana, and the Port of Seattle. When he arrived, he set to transforming the business model of our port. He led a resurgence in maritime trade and port development, which includes, as we know, service between Cleveland and Europe. Probably few of us fully appreciate the significant economic impact of our port, which sees an average of more than 13 million tons of cargo a year through our harbor, representing 3.5 billion a year in economic activity, and more than 20,000 local jobs. While we see the freighters plying Lake Erie, his work involves so much more in protecting and preserving our waterways, from storm cleanup to dredging, to work on the Flask East Bank and Project Icebreaker, Lake Erie's wind energy development project. I should note that the port is a founding member of Green Marine, the environmental certification program. Will sees tremendous growth potential in international business, and who knows, maybe we'll even see more cruise ships landing in the Port of Cleveland. He's also done groundbreaking work in the boardroom. 2 years ago, the port elected the first female chair and presented an all-female slate of officers. He serves on many boards, most notably as president of the Great Lakes Ports Association, the boards of Cleveland Water Alliance, the Council of the Great Lakes Region, Flats Forward, NOACA, and Cuyahoga County Economic Development Commission. He's a graduate of Leadership Cleveland 2012. And Will, I turn it over to you to educate us on our waterways.
Great. Thank you, Mary Ann. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, CLC, for having me for your speaker today. Can everybody hear me okay? I just want to do a quick sound check. Okay, great. I can see some of your faces, and others I just see your names, and hello to all of you. Mary Ann, thanks for that nice introduction, and you touched on a lot of the things I'm going to try to touch on quickly. I'm only going to take up probably 10 or 15 minutes, so this will have to be high level. And then, I want to leave time for some interaction, questions, comments, anything that we can dig into in the last half of the program. So let me just jump in here. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on what I refer to as sort of the theory of the port. Why do we have a port authority? Why is it important? Why does it matter? What do we try to do? Some of those points. Well, I think the sort of the underlying assumption that at least I think is true, and we can certainly debate it, is that maritime transportation is good. It's good for our economy. It's actually good for our environment. And I think in general, it's good for our community. We have some big employers here in Cleveland. Top of the list would be Cleveland-Cliffs, which now owns our steel mill, and there are other industries that are 100% dependent on waterborne transportation, on receiving and sometimes shipping materials by water. And without being able to navigate through our waterways here in Cleveland, they wouldn't exist, and all those jobs would disappear. Some might argue, well, maybe they're outmoded jobs or we can replace them, but I take the view that we can build on our legacy here of industry, still very relevant, still moving into the future as advanced manufacturing, and water is a really important part of it. Mary Ann mentioned kind of our top line numbers, 3.5 billion in annual economic output related to our port and our harbor, more than 20,000 jobs, lots of business revenues being generated, payroll checks being issued, taxes being paid. So it's still a very big part of our economy here in Cleveland, and sort of just chugs along. We see the ships, and most of the time we don't think about it that much. Moving freight by water is less expensive. It emits less carbon per what we call ton mile. It takes trucks off the road. It's generally safer. It's not perfect. It has to figure out itself how it's going to improve its environmental profile going forward, but that's happening very quickly as we all move into a future where we're going to try to protect our planet and meet the challenge of climate change. In addition to what we do with our maritime core here at the port, and it is our core, it's really been the priority, at least since I've gotten here. We're a big provider of financing for many projects. Marianne mentioned the Flat Seas Bank, but it's really a very big list, and that most people would be shocked to see that most of the bigger landmark real estate development projects around here, we have a hand in financing through bond issuances. So we really act as a traditional maritime port, and at the same time we're a development finance authority for our region as well. We're now up, I think, close to $4 billion worth of bonds being issued, and that's providing capital to projects that flows through the Port Authority. And that goes back, that dates back to 1995 when this all started, and the very first project was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which the Port Authority, oddly enough, we still own that facility to this day, although it's certainly managed and run extremely well by our friends over at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The third kind of main bucket of work and priority for us are sort of loosely termed community benefit projects and collaborations, and there are a lot of them, too many for me to mention, but we're involved with lots of other agencies, nonprofits, other governments, citizens groups on making the trail connections complete, working on lake and river access, Cleveland Lakefront Nature Preserve, which I hope you've all been to, formerly known as Dike 14. Projects which you may not have heard of, one called CHEERS, and I'll unpack that acronym here in a few minutes. But I think that's a very important emerging opportunity for us here in the community on the lakefront. Flotsam and Jetsam, our workboats that you see plying our waters, cleaning up floating debris. A couple of years ago, we started a grant program. We, as part of a sort of broader diversity, equity, inclusion effort at the port, we are now peeling off 10% of the fees we earn off of all of our bond issuances and turning around and plowing that back into the community through a grant program. And some years it'll be more, some years it'll be less, depending on the volume of bond issuances. But it's a way for us to try to get out ahead of those projects and put some capital into the community so that more people can participate, hopefully, in the port-related economy, in the construction trades, in transportation, down on our docks, wherever the opportunities may be. We want to try to get people ready to participate, because by the time something is going to get built and come out of the ground, it's too late for a lot of people. So our job at the port is to take all of this and try to maximize all these benefits for the community in a transparent way, in an efficient way, in an equitable way, in an inclusive way, and hopefully at the end of the day, make a difference for our community. I'll segue here into land use, particularly waterfront, lakefront land use, and just make a couple comments. Everyone loves to talk about lakefront land use, riverfront land use. A lot of strong opinions out there. I like to talk about it. It's fun. It gets everybody excited. And the good news is there's lots of potential. We're still trying to turn our lakefront and our riverfront into something that's more in keeping with the 21st century, and not something that dates back to our early industrial period, which is the legacy we've been left with. My job here at the port is I'm not a decision maker on any of these things. I really see myself, and I see the port more as, we're here to inform. We're here to inform voters, policymakers, anyone who asks questions on what we see as the trade-offs. It's always trade-offs in land use. In our job is to just try to provide information and facilitate efficient and effective decision making. good news is, and we can talk about this some more here in a couple minutes, but the way I see it is we've got enough waterfront to go around. If you look at our river and you look at the lakefront, even though I know we've got large tracts of land that are encumbered by the port or the airport or places where the public really can't come down and make use, we still have a lot of infill, still a lot of places where we can do a lot. Some of that is already happening. We're seeing that certainly with what Metro Parks has been able to do since they took over on the lakefront parks. It's been just tremendously important for the community. Other things are in the works, like Irishtown Bend, which I think is going to be, just a world-class facility for our community once we can get that hillside stabilized and then move toward the development phase. I mentioned Cheers, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the area in front of the stadium, which of course has not started to turn into anything yet, but it's still a large swath of land that we can work with there. So I think I think it's all about making good decisions, about good design and good planning, and I think we're going to have some great outcomes here in Cleveland in the future. And it's really not it's not an either or. I think we can have working waterfronts, and we can have waterfronts for people, and we can have waterfronts for living. We can have waterfronts for recreating and working, and so on and so forth. General priorities here at the port, kind of, what do I wake up every day and focus on and try to move forward on? Certainly the business of the port, trying to make us the best port on the Great Lakes, try to be one of the best port authorities in the country, improve access, usability, and the value of our waterfronts, as I was just alluding to, is really important for us. DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's got to be a priority for every leader in Cleveland today. I think it is. It's we're not going to make change overnight. We all know that. No magic bullets. But if all of us are conscious of the issues, and all of us are committed, then we're going to move our community in the right direction. Sustainability, fighting climate change. In my industry, we're all driving aggressively toward net zero carbon. We're all trying to figure out how to electrify what we do. Ports are heavy. We're heavy industry. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes the technologies just aren't there yet, and they need to. We need to see those get developed so we can put them into use. We have a legacy of environmental injustice here in Cleveland, like lots of older cities. We've all got to roll up our sleeves and work on those, and we're engaged in some of those, and we'll be engaged in more of those. Making our shorelines resilient. You're going to just hear that word resiliency a lot, and to me, it's sort of like Irishtown Bend, in that it'll be a challenge. We're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to find money. We're going to have to do some things that aren't going to be easy. But on the other hand, I think there's going to be some benefits on the backside that we can all take advantage of. A little bit more specifically, we're working, as Marianne alluded to be kind of a sort of a real port, a port with containers, where you've got multiple connections to places all over the world. We're a bit disadvantaged coming all the way through the St. Lawrence Seaway, particularly the way the U.S. government and the Canadian government have run the system. They tend to make it harder for companies that own ships to use, as opposed to making it easier. And we've had to overcome that, and we continue to work to overcome that. But I will assure you that of all the great ports on the Great Lakes, we're at the forefront. We're the only port that handles containers. We still have our Europe service. We're working on more innovations, and we are the leader here on the Great Lakes, and that's going to benefit Cleveland. I've mentioned Irishtown Bend a couple of times. Stabilizing Irishtown Bend. I mean, that has, from the moment I got here and realized that there's a exigent threat of a collapse of that hillside. We've been working to figure out, how do you design a solution? What do you have to build there? How do you stabilize that hillside? Where can we get the money? Working with our partners. We're very close. We're hoping to get construction underway next year. And it'll be very exciting when the first shovel hits the ground there, and we're actually moving toward getting that project done. Cheers. So what is Cheers? If you haven't heard of it, Cheers is the Cleveland Harbor East Embayment Resiliency Study. Big mouthful with a happy sounding name. We're looking, along with other partners, including Metro Parks, City of Cleveland, and others, at how could we take dredge material potentially and build up some new landforms in that area, make essentially new park and open space that people can enjoy on the lakefront, and at the same time make the shoreline more resilient there, protect the shoreline, especially where you may have driven on the shoreway along I-90, and when the waves are really heavy, you get water literally, lapping over and onto the interstate system. There are issues there that need to be resolved. So we have this chance to fix something, protect our shoreline, and turn it into something great. It's a long-term project. It's a big project, but it's an exciting project, and I think it can be a sort of a starting point for us here for more innovative ways to use dredge material and what we can do with our lakefronts. Completing the trail network and working with our partners on that is very important to us. We're moving ahead. Cruise shipping. Marianne mentioned cruise ships. We got pushed probably 2 years behind schedule by the pandemic, but cruise ships are coming in much bigger numbers to the Great Lakes, and they're going to be smaller. They're going to be more agile ships. They won't be the behemoths you see at Fort Lauderdale or wherever you might have seen cruise ships. These ships will be more sort of the expedition class, and the cruise lines, the operators have, after a long time, finally realized that the Great Lakes is sort of this big empty cruising ground, and we want Cleveland to be a port of call, if not a home port for cruise ships, and we're well on our way, I think, to that goal as well. So I've probably gone longer than I intended to go, so I'm going to stop. And if anybody wants to jump in, I don't know how you want to handle, Bob. I don't know if you're going to moderate here, but please jump in with questions or comments.
Absolutely. Thanks, Will. Really appreciate that overview. And if you do have questions, enter them in the chat and we'll get them going here. I have some questions that have come through for me, and just generally starting. So you mentioned the delay with the cruise ship process, due to the pandemic. Overall, how was shipping impacted? Shipping overall, by the pandemic, and then in particular with the Port of Cleveland, what changes or not did you see as a result of kind of a worldwide slowdown?
Well, yeah, we got hit by kind of a double whammy, Bobby. It's hard to sort of remember back before COVID changed our lives, but we had all those tariffs go in place on steel and other imported goods, and that hurt us here. We really saw a drop off in steel in 19, and then of course we the pandemic in 20. So we were down in 20 quite a bit. We did operate all the way through the pandemic. Commendations to those on the front lines, our port workers, other companies' workers who worked all the way through the pandemic to keep things moving. We were probably down about 20%, maybe 25% in 2020. We have bounced back. We're back up to normal this year. I have not seen any sort of what looks to be sort of permanent pattern changes in what's shipped through our port at this point. There is, you probably read about this, and maybe you saw an opinion piece I wrote that ran in the Columbus Dispatch, about sort of supply chain disruptions globally, and we had the big slowdown during COVID, and then there was this huge demand spike with people, ordering things online, and people, sort of patterns changing in the way people were consuming goods, and that has really messed up the world of shipping, ocean shipping, and ports and inland transportation from ports. Things are not in good shape. We could be part of the solution here in Cleveland. It's one of the things I'm out there really pressing, is that smaller ports like Cleveland can be relievers, and it's time for us to stop trying to stuff everything through the massive Los Angeles, Savannah, New York, Seattle, Tacoma gateways and start using ports like Cleveland more.
Great, thanks. Specific question here, why aren't more ports in the Great Lakes container ship capable? And I would add my own question to that. How many ports are in the Great Lakes in total, or Lake Erie, let's say?
Oh, there are a lot of ports and harbors, too many. I couldn't give you an exact number, but a lot. I mean, upwards of probably 30, 40 commercial harbors that are mostly federal harbors that get maintained by the federal government, including ours, the channels. Out of those, there are about 5 leading ports, of which we're one, sort of starting up, up in the northwest with Duluth, Minnesota, Superior, Wisconsin, coming down to Chicago, coming around to Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland. We're the major ports, and other than Duluth, sort of in the major population centers and production centers, which would stand to reason. Your first part of your question about ports being container ready or able to handle containers. Mm-hmm. Most of us can handle containers if there was demand, if saying it a little more precisely, if we had ocean carriers, shipping lines, which would come in with containers or go out with containers. That's what has held us back. There is huge concentration, like lots of industries. There's only a handful of companies globally that move almost all the containers on our oceans. Those big companies make all the decisions. And if they don't want to come in and serve your port, sort of like an airport and an airline, you're not going to get service. And so we've been trying to break through that here in Cleveland. We started our own little service, the Cleveland Europe Express, which is still going. It's very niche. It's very small. It's not run by one of these. It's an independent company. It's outside of the big consortia that move most of the containers. We would like to get the big consortia we'd like to sort of pressure them into the point where they will serve us or allow somebody else to connect to them, sort of like a hub and spoke, kind of a system. And we think that's in the offing. But we are all set up to handle containers here. We're further along than anybody in the Great Lakes. U.S. Customs has approved us. They haven't approved anybody else for import containers in the Great Lakes. We have the equipment, we have the workforce that's been trained, and we're doing it. Everybody else can get there. There's nothing physically stopping them. They're going to need to do what we've done over the last 10 years or so.
Great. You'll see this question in the chat asking for an update on the hullets stored at the port adjacent to the Whiskey Island Connector Trail, and any progress on finding a potential site for display.
Hewlett's. Okay.
Hewlett's, thank you.
Sure. Well, that's a complicated situation. Short answer is yes. There's some progress toward a display. There's a committee, a group that's working diligently on it. They're under sort of a deadline that relates back to an Army Corps of Engineers permit. Won't go into all that, but there still is the potential for a display. Probably, if it's going to happen, it'll be somewhere in the Whiskey Island area, which is appropriate because that's where they were originally. They're sort of sitting in pieces. The remains are sitting in pieces on our bulk terminal, and the port, as part of this whole process, has pledged $500,000 toward an eventual display, and there may need to be some other monies that are raised. I hope we can get that figured out. It'd be nice to see. They're not going to be re-erected. There's no way to take an entire Hewlett ore unloader and put it back up. It would be astronomically expensive. They're enormous, massive machines, and that's just not in the cards. But taking important pieces and displaying them is certainly still alive.
Great. Collaboration question. You've mentioned the rock haul. I know that some of your financing with the Cavs facility in Independence, the city of Cleveland, goes on and on. Collaboration is key. Sounds like it's key to your work. In what ways, with what organizations do you collaborate the most, and how does that help advance your work?
it's almost easier to think of, names of organizations we don't collaborate with. I mean, at the top of the list would be certainly, county government, city government. The mayor and the county executive appoint the board members to the Port Authority, my governing board. I work for them. So there's that, political appointment connection directly back to those two governments. We're in, probably, daily interaction with the city, county. Metro parks more and more, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District routinely, RTA a lot, NOACA, huge partner for us, been instrumental in getting us important funding for Irishtown Bend and other projects. GCP and certainly the private sector and a number of companies that either do business with the port, mostly through bond financing, you name it, Sherwin-Williams with their new headquarters, Eaton, most of the corporate headquarters, most of the large mixed-use projects, Flats East Bank, most of the hotels, we touch all those things. So, that's just our modus operandi. We're always working with those entities, many nonprofits, Land Studio, I need to mention, Ohio City Incorporated on Irishtown Bend. We've been moving that together, moving that forward together. Many others, CDCs, Cleveland Foundation, GUND, you name it. I mean, we're absolutely engaged with all of them.
That's great. Thanks. Looking ahead, this is sort of the long term outlook for just maritime activity and shipping. When you look at some environmental concerns with rising sea levels, increased storm activity and such, are we positioned, where we are geographically? Is that advantageous to us to be a more secure and reliable destination for shipping, and then the outgrowth from where we are in the country? How are those conversations sort of impacting decisions you're making now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a difficult one, but yes, they are. I mean, we're looking at everything we do through that lens, through climate change, through how do we be resilient, reliable in the future. We've seen dramatic changes in lake levels, and we saw lake levels get as high as they've ever gotten. They've dropped rapidly. I think they're coming back up again. Nobody knows. I mean, there's some modeling, but I just don't think science, we're not sure. So we're going to have to have, we're all going to have we're going to have lake frontage that could be, functional if the water goes down, if the water goes up, more storms. There's certainly going to be, we've seen the weather get more volatile. I've lived here 11 years, but it seems to me that even in the 11 years I've lived here, I mean, the rains seem to be heavier and flashier, and we've had some tremendous rains. We had one a couple of weeks ago. We're all going to have to, our infrastructure is going to have to deal with that. Are we one of those, are we one of sort of a climate refuge sort of a place, in a place where, we're not going to have hurricanes, we're not going to have earthquakes, we aren't going to have sea level inundating us? Perhaps. I mean, I think that's a possibility that, drought, extreme heat, et cetera. Maybe that works in our favor. It's hard to sort of feel good about something that's going to potentially harm others, but yes, I mean, I think we do have some advantages. We certainly have capacity here. I mean, we're a city that was once 1 million people, and now we're around 400,000, and we're a region that has a lot of capacity, roadway capacity and water, among the board of the Cleveland Water Alliance, and water is an advantage, and we have a lot of it. I think all of us as leaders are going to have to, work through those questions. We're going to have to work closely with scientists and try to get answers as we move ahead. But I think we can position ourselves, I believe, as a place where, you can come here and do business, and your power won't go off, or maybe you could generate power from wind energy. And I would like to, again, I'd like to give a little plug for wind energy. Speaking of energy, I mean, that's one policy area where, boy, we've got a lot of work to do in Ohio, and we could suffer here in Northeast Ohio and in Cleveland if we don't get our act together on the energy front. You know, we're way too dependent on fossil fuel and energy sources that are, you know, quickly going into the dustbin of history, and we better get on the renewable train here fast.
Great. Thanks so much, Will. Time really flies by. We are at time. Really appreciate everything you've shared with us, and we'll turn it over or back to Mary Ann.
Thanks for having me.
Out.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for your time and for sharing so much information, Will. And folks, I'm sure, can go to your website and find additional information.
Yes, the website's certainly available. It's just a starting point. You know, we're really accessible. If anybody just wants to reach out to me or Jade Davis, who's our VP for External Affairs, don't hesitate. We're easy to access.
Great, because I'm sure there are many more questions that didn't get posed today. So thank you.